When it comes to world history, there are two countries that almost always get shafted, and boy do they love to complain about it: Canada and Australia. Now, since you all voted on the latter, let's take a few minutes to learn more about the island nation usually pushed away to the bottom of the planet where everyone is just kind of doing their own thing. Oh, and also they're full of those velociraptor deer things. This is the history of Australia. Australia's human history actually spans back a really long time, like 40 to 60,000 years ago, and possibly even 70,000 years ago. This would make the first Australian Aborigines even older than the internet. Oh, and the Ice Age was also still a thing back then, which I guess was probably the more important detail. Anyways, since a lot of the Earth's ocean water was locked away in the ice caps, the sea levels were significantly lower than they were today. This made most of Southeast Asia look more like this. These lands are known today as Sundaland and they formed a partial land bridge which allowed people to actually get across the shark-infested waters to the land where everything still wanted to kill them anyway. Because this was so long ago, Australia was host to even more exotic fauna than what we find today, like Megalania, which was just like today's Komodo dragons except 4 times larger and over 300 kilograms. What the f***, Australia? Oh, and yeah, there are still huge animals like that today, like the cassowary. No, Americans, that's not a bird you eat for a holiday. That's a bird you run from in terror hoping it doesn't disembowel you. That's not a Thanksgiving turkey, that's a you chicken. Sorry, I heard Australians swear a lot, I was just trying to fit in, I guess. The Aboriginal tribes spread throughout Australia, almost completely undisturbed for tens of thousands of years, allowing them to branch off into numerous language groups and cultures. Then all that stopped being quite true after 1606, when Willem Janszoon, a Dutch explorer exploring the Malay, the Indonesian, the insert better name here, archipelago, and found the northern tip of a peninsula that would eventually join the modern-day state of Queensland. This wasn't a coincidence, as around this time, the Verenigde Oostindische Compagnie was very much a thing, and their headquarters was in Batavia, now known as Jakarta. And they were always looking for better ways back to Amsterdam. The thing about Indonesia is that it actually isn't too far from Australia, especially compared to the Netherlands. And people would occasionally bump into Australia while taking advantage of westerly winds on their way to Southeast Asia. Kangaroos. In 1642, explorers also discovered Fiji, New Zealand, and Van Diemen's Land, now Tasmania. Then they encountered the natives, spread some disease, and the natives didn't quite understand their questions about these things, which is why we call them kangaroos. Actually, that story isn't quite true. It was debunked in the 70s. In 1655, a world map was put onto the floor of the Amsterdam Stadhuis, or Town Hall, more specifically in the Burgerzaal, or Burgers Hall. This map displayed what they knew at the time of Australia, which was getting to be quite a bit. Yeah, I don't exactly know what more to say about it at this point, I just wanted to make that image. So blah blah blah, they named it New Holland, but they abandoned it since Australian soil isn't that great for farming or something like that. Maybe that's what that fairy bread thing is all about. Then Britain came and initially decided to colonize just the parts of the east coast they had settled, and eventually drew their way westwards. In 1776, freedom happened and Britain needed a replacement for America, so they started settling Australia. Initially, they established penal colonies like Botany Bay, established in modern-day Sydney in 1788. Wait, hang on, Jade from Up and Atom, you're from Sydney, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you're not like a criminal, are you?
Yes, I mean, no. No.
Well, it never hurts to be sure. Eventually, people realized that Australia wasn't actually that bad of a place to live and set up colonies, like the New South Wales colony, not to be confused with the modern-day state of New South Wales. Eventually, people got tired of living in colonies, so the colonies were broken up in the 1850s, and they now resembled what they mostly look like today, except for this part in the middle that doesn't really know what to do with itself. I mean, they use UTC plus 930 for some reason. As the two colonies split into 6, there was also a gold rush going on, and the colonies mostly governed themselves while leaving things like foreign affairs, defense, and shipping up to London. Oh, and could you stop sending us your convicts? Australia asked a few decades earlier. Okay, here's the very last shipment, we promise, Britain said in the 1860s, almost 80 years after Botany Bay was first established. Right at the start of the 20th century, the Commonwealth of Australia was founded after talks between the colonies of New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Queensland, Tasmania, Western Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. Except New Zealand and Fiji didn't quite feel like it, so it was just everywhere on the islands of Australia and Tasmania. But they called the whole collection Australia just to make things easier. Canberra was founded in 1913 as Sydney and Melbourne couldn't agree on who was to be the capital of this new country. Australia and New Zealand, however, did team up in World War I without the Nazis as the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, or ANZAC, and fought the Gallipoli campaign against the Ottoman Empire, and lost. After World War I was over, Australia became fully independent in 1931. Then came Australia's greatest military defeat in its history, the Great Emu War, where the Australian Army tried to exterminate emus in 1932 to try to improve crop yields, but failed and ended up just putting a bounty on them instead. Then that whole World War II thing happened, and Japan launched air raids on Darwin because fascists evidently hate evolution. And Australia fought back heavily, helping out a bit in the Pacific Theater thing. Then after the war, Australia prospered, but also adopted the White Australia policy in the 50s. Then Singapore gave them Christmas Island in 1958, this guy drowned while out for a swim in 1967. Did I mention he was also the Prime Minister? Yeah, that might have been the more important detail. That big shell thing opened in 1973, the White Australia policy became a not thing in 1975, and that same year, the formerly Australian territory of Papua and New Guinea gained their independence. Finally, the Australia Act was passed in 1986, simultaneously in London and Canberra, as it was to end London's control over Australia, but no one knew who exactly was the higher responsibility on the matter, so both parliaments just signed two identical acts at the same time. And we're pretty much here today with the current Commonwealth of Australia, still barely home to 25 million people. That's a rare accent. Okay, I should probably check how accurate that was. Hey Jade, what did you think?
Hey, as long as you mentioned kangaroos, I'm happy.
It's the least I can do after calling you a criminal. So that's basically the history of Australia, at least from an American's perspective. Basically, a whole bunch of squabbles mixed in with a bunch of stories that we just cannot stop laughing at. Thanks for watching, and thanks to my friend Jade
G'day.
for appearing in this video. If you're interested, go subscribe to her channel, Up and Atom, and also be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Canubis Productions to learn something new every Sunday.